now pronounce you man of knife.
See, we working on his brow chakra. We're just in back of the crown chakra.
You are a coward, son of a bitch!
We'll do it live.
All right, gang. Welcome to episode 2 of Waxing the Porpoise. Got your host G-Baby, Jim, and my co-host Steve. How's it going, friend?
Good to see you.
Good to see you too. All right, so we're back again. This time we're changing it up a little bit. And instead of talking about a movie Steve hasn't seen, which is a travesty, we're talking about Jason Simpson in his significance. He played in the OJ murder trial, 95-ish. So this is one I've wanted to talk about for a while. Ever since I learned about this like 2 years ago, and I was like, holy shit, that's kind of mind-blowing. Just hearing a couple of the reasons why that trickled out, and I kind of put a pin in it, and this is a perfect opportunity to come back to it. So we'll be diving into him as a suspect and what makes him such a good suspect. I think I mean, at very minimum, he should have been investigated, and I don't think he was ever listed like as a proper suspect. But based on everything I found, it seems like he should have, for sure.
Yeah, it sounds like they deposed him for the civil suit after the criminal trial. And a couple of the things I was reading sort of made it seem like they were, they had a cursory interest in him, but they certainly didn't, run his DNA or his fingerprints, or they didn't seem to take him too seriously until maybe the horse was just too far out of the barn. They had already picked their guy and they didn't want to. So this is one of the interesting things about police investigations where they don't want to investigate too many people, because then when they go to trial, the defense can be like, well, what about this guy? You spent an awful lot of time looking into him. Couldn't he be the one? So once they kind of zero in on who they think their suspect is, they kind of put blinders on to take that tactic away from the defense, which is pretty fucked up, because it's like, oh, we're not going to do our job to make our job easier by not doing our job,
Yeah, it's kind of a weird thing about cases, because then you're just opening yourself up for in this case the prosecution, or you open yourself up for the defense to poke holes.
Yeah, well, in a perfect world, the prosecution would be like, we left no stone unturned. We looked at everybody we thought and we cleared them, instead of this weird like, oh no, we didn't really look into it because it's so unlikely, so
yeah, on that front, it's like, if they were so easy to rule out, then that shouldn't eat up a bunch of your time and resource, so why not do it? Why leave that
right.
door open? But
yeah. And if you want to talk about well, for those of you who haven't inferred from the beginning, Jason Simpson is the son of OJ Simpson, who was famously acquitted in 95 of the double murder of his ex-wife, Nicole Brown Simpson, and restaurant waiter Ron Goldman, friend of Nicole, maybe lover, who knows. And Jim and I were just talking before we started recording that, because we had different memories of the trial because we were a little younger. I think I was, I don't know, in elementary school or something. So I didn't really pay that much attention to it, but I didn't realize the trial spanned 11 months from the time they seated the jury to final verdict, which is just insane.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. I think you're a couple years younger than me. But like from a personal side, what made the OJ trial like resonate and hearing about this Jason Simpson stuff is, so I was in 94, I was in fourth grade. So 94, 95, fourth and fifth grade. And at the time, my mom was seeing this dude who was going to law school, and he was like Joe defense attorney. And he also had like, he loved OJ growing up as a kid. So like this was on like, Court TV, C-SPAN, whatever channel it was. I was watching this every single day and I was, like I said, fourth, fifth grade, the entire trial. And the boyfriend, he even based like some of his like thesis. So it was on the trial. So this was like pretty much like 24/7. And so I was like totally pro OJ. The whole time. Like I remember when
I thought you were going to say you took the opposite approach and said, "You're not my real dad."
Yeah. I'm going to be in my room painting homo things.
I don't want to play catch with you, Jerry.
It was kind of like a relationship like with the stepdad Dennis Leary in The Sandlot.
Yeah.
Kind of a love-hate deal. Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, so this has like, and I was thinking about it too, like now, like we're of a certain age where there's kids, like they have no frame of reference, like watching this on TV, the white Bronco chase, and like, if the glove don't fit, you have to acquit, and all these things that I like. To me, it was like a cultural touchstone, as it were.
Yeah. It was certainly a spectacle. I can remember my mom was really into it, and then just hearing like family arguments about it, and it was just kind of one of those things that everybody was enraptured with, I guess. It definitely took over the zeitgeist or whatever for a long time.
And this was pre-internet too, so this was like this was the hot ticket. Everyone was talking about it and wanting to know details about it and everything. So I think that made it such a prominent thing in the mid 90s there.
It touched a lot of different topics that made it more interesting to people. Like you've got the celebrity, you've got the salacious murder, the LAPD and their sort of checkered past, and they
had big black eyes on them. They're coming right off of the Rodney King and the Watts riots, and the corruption, like the Rampart district, like just real bad. So they needed a win big time.
Yeah. So as I started taking a little bit of a deeper dive at Jason the son, he kind of just has like all the hallmarks of, if you were to sketch the profile of the type of person who would do this brutal of a murder from scratch, he definitely fits the bill. I guess we could just go all the way back. So, he is the son of OJ's first marriage. And when he was 7 years old, I believe, is when OJ started dating Nicole while still married to his mom. And then when he was 9, they finally got divorced, which is never fun for a kid. And then I think 2 months later, his youngest sister drowned in their backyard swimming pool, which is like just an additional trauma at a really young age that just sort of, it can plant those seeds of, who knows what. And, OJ's definitely has his history of domestic violence, which, Jason sort of adopts that later on as well, which is just the gift that keeps on giving. When kids witness that in the home, they just go out and do it themselves. So, you've got this pretty toxic environment that he's growing up in. Apparently, he waited until the ripe old age of 14 to start drinking and doing ecstasy and cocaine, which stuff like that in a developing mind can also plant some seeds of really bad mental illness.
Yeah.
He got into it with one of his ex-girlfriends and like cut her hair off with a knife and like beat the shit out of another one. And I don't know if you saw some of his medical records show that he was admitted into the hospital 3 times with suicide attempts.
Yeah, and around probably during that is when he got diagnosed with the intermittent rage disorder, aka the Jekyll and Hyde syndrome.
Oh yeah, that little old thing. Yeah, intermittent rage disorder. So
and wasn't the third one that he also he allegedly went after one of his bosses with a knife?
Oh yeah, at the time of the murder, he was on probation for assault with a deadly weapon. He attacked his boss with a knife. So that's not good.
No.
But so leading up to the murders, let me know if you saw the same things I did, because I did see a couple conflicting timelines. But it sounds like, I guess I should say, a lot of the research I found was done by a private investigator named William Deere, who wrote a book that I didn't read called OJ is Innocent and I Can Prove It.
Same. Yeah.
Okay. So this guy apparently spent years looking into this, and, sounds like he uncovered quite a few things and at least makes a decent case for at least giving the kid a second look. So
yeah, totally.
Sounds like 6 months before the murders, Jason went to the emergency room because he was hearing voices and felt as if he was going to rage, in quotes, which that checks out if he's got intermittent rage disorder.
Yep.
And then 2 or 3 months shortly before the murder, he stopped taking his intermittent rage disorder medication, which not good. So that author, he ended up buying, I guess, an old storage unit that Jason had that would, defunct. He stopped paying it, so they put it up for auction. And
there's storage wars on it.
Yeah, so there's some potential evidence that he finds that I'm sure we'll talk about later. But I think he found a diary as well, which if you read it, you don't have to be an expert in mental health to realize like this person is clearly mentally ill and struggling. And apparently this diary was confirmed to be an actual, like, by a handwriting expert, to be from Jason. It wasn't just like something he picked up. And he's talking about how he's 3 different people, and it talks about how it literally says he'll go as far as killing anyone who hurts his loved ones, which, somebody writes something in their diary, they might just be venting, who knows. But if you just add that to sort of the totality of the circumstances, it's just one more little building block.
Yeah, it's not a good look.
Yeah, so it's just another piece of the puzzle, which is this man's psyche. So
I wonder if he had to, like, if it coincided with the rage disorder, if because it's top of mind for me, what is it, DID, the dissociative identification disorder, where that's like the multiple personalities. I wonder if that played into it too. But
yeah, I think he had a litany of mental issues. Like, it sort of just had this weird bipolar manic sort of feel to it. He's like writing in all caps crazy stuff. And yeah, so he was diagnosed with that intermittent rage, but I don't know enough about how those different ailments work to,
So that makes sense why they prescribed him Depakote then, which is used specifically in the treatment of mania that coincides with bipolar disorder, epilepsy, and migraine headaches. So him stop doing that and then stopping it all of a sudden. I mean, to me, the timeline I saw was he stopped taking it 2 months ish before the murders occurred. And to me, that seems like if he was taking it with any kind of consistency, that stopping for 2 months, by that point, maybe most of the effects would be out of your system. So any kind of added benefit of taking that stuff was then completely gone. And then there's a whole other set of trigger stuff too around the time of the murders that we'll get into, I'm sure, that again add back to this this mountain of circumstantial evidence that to me makes him a really good suspect.
Yeah, and I don't know for certain, but I feel like I've heard that if somebody has some mental illness and they're taking medication for an extended period of time and then they go off it, they don't just sort of revert back to like the mean of mental illness. There's like a rubber band effect where they swing to the far opposite side and have like a serious episode, or they can, So yeah, you were talking about one of the potential triggers that could have caused this. On the night of the murder, Nicole and her family, some of her kids and apparently her parents were supposed to go to his restaurant, but at the last second changed plans. I'm unclear whether or not they told him they changed plans or if they just sort of
just ghosted him.
Yeah, so I've seen it kind of reported that might be sort of something that triggered him because he felt like disrespected or abandoned or whatever. You never know what.
Yeah, I'm sure that didn't sit well with him based on his history and like his kind of mental outlook. Like that probably burned him up pretty bad, and tied into with like I didn't realize that the sister had drowned in the pool, but now the memory's starting to creep back. But I had completely forgotten that. But yeah, that's a huge point of trauma. And then too, like I didn't realize that OJ had started seeing Nicole Brown, like probably having an affair before he actually broke it off with Jason's mom.
Yeah,
so
that was
those two things are pretty huge.
Yeah.
And then too, just to add the restaurant that they did go to. So it seemed like they ghosted him. We don't know if they told him or not. And then it seems to me like he found out a little bit after the fact, but they went to a place called Mezzaluna to have dinner instead, which is the place where Ronald Goldman worked as a waiter.
Correct.
Yeah. So if he knew that, if he was aware of like Nicole fucking around on OJ and they have a reported, documented love-hate relationship, and he knew that they spurned his restaurant to go here, which was also where the dude was working, Ron Goldman, who was fucking around on Nicole Brown. I mean, that sounds like a powder keg to me.
Yeah, I don't think there's a lot of evidence showing that they were like an item. I think he maybe just found himself in the wrong place at the wrong time later that night.
Okay.
And I think it was during his deposition for the civil trial, he mentioned he knew what restaurant they were going to because it's apparently one that they went to a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But he may have learned that after the fact, not sure. But so on the night of the murder, this is where it gets a little bit weird because I saw some conflicting reports about the timeline, and some of it we can get into a little later because there's an interesting piece that may or may not have anything to do with it. But it sounds like he was at work, and no one could really vouch for his whereabouts after 9:50. One of the reports I saw said that they believe the murders took place between 9:45 and 10:05. That's contradicted somewhere else, and we can talk about that too. But it also says that his time card was handwritten, even though the electronic time clock at the restaurant was working fine, which is very unusual.
Mm-hmm.
Again, in and of itself, not really worth anything to perk your ears up at, but just when you add all of these things together, it's like, the
night of the murder, it happens to be the first time he ever had to do a manual clock in where he wrote in his times. And I think they went back and there was no history of the time clock not working or anything like that. So that's
right.
That's highly suspect.
An odd coincidence.
Yeah.
If that's all it is. So, and yeah, since he was a chef, he they bring their own knives, it sounds like. So he would have, if you see like those old lock picking kits where you like roll it out and it's got all their tools in there.
Yeah.
It sounds like, when he came and went from work, he would have this, his own full set of knives. And I assume the reason is because they're probably really expensive. So he wouldn't want to leave them behind at the restaurant and have some dipshit,
Right.
throw them in the dishwasher and ruin them or steal them or who knows what.
Yeah, I think they're really particular and precious about that stuff because he was a sous chef too, is for what I saw. So he's doing a lot of like the preparing, the cutting, and everything. So yeah, that's like, his most valued tool in his tool bag, his set of knives. So
yeah, he's not just sprinkling creme fraiche on stuff. He's doing a lot of the chopping. I think sous is French for under. I have no idea, but I heard that somewhere.
Yeah, it's because he's the number 2, so he's like right underneath the head chef.
I guess.
How fun.
I don't speak French. Very fun. So we talked about the storage unit that was purchased by the private investigator and the diary that I believe was found there. Maybe he found it somewhere else, but a few other things were found in there. I guess we'll just start with, there's a photograph dated March 24th of 93, so a year before the murder. And it shows Jason wearing this Navy style watch cap, which if you followed the trial, which I really didn't, that was one of the pieces of evidence they found.
Yep.
It's a crime scene.
I've seen people, it's a knit cap. It's like, is it just me or that's a fucking beanie? It's a beanie. It's a black beanie or a navy colored, dark ass navy beanie.
Yeah. So as of now, we don't know where he is. He's off his medication. He's somewhere with knives, feeling possibly spurned by his dad's wife. I don't know if I think they were getting divorced at this time because there's some pretty fucked up like 911 calls where you can find Nicole, like, he's going to kill me.
Yeah.
So they were obviously going through some shit. So who knows where his mind was at? Because maybe, I don't know. I've seen speculation that he considered her like a second mom, but I also saw some people who were like, I think he had a thing for her himself. So there's like a weird stew of possible mommy issues and weird like jealousy and
it sounds like a perfect stew of all of that. Like he probably had the hots for her a little bit because she was an attractive fucking woman, and like the bitterness from breaking up his dad and his mom. And then I thought one of the through lines too was that he knew that she was fucking around on OJ with Ron Goldman, but it sounds like no from what you saw. But even without that, it's definitely it sounds like a tumultuous relationship with his stepmom for sure.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things about this case is there's so much information. Like we said, the trial went 11 months, and if they're running 8-hour days or even like 7-hour days, that is just an absolute avalanche of information.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's really easy to pick out one thing, but if you're not watching the whole thing, you might not realize like, oh no, that was actually corrected later or contradicted by someone else later.
Yeah, just the sheer amount of stuff that went through that process, like, is probably mind-boggling.
Well, and it seems like everything you find that's a quote-unquote fact is disputed somewhere else. So like one of the things that they say points to OJ's guilt is, well, they found a size 12 bloody footprint at the crime scene in the exact same type of shoes that he had in his house. But then, 10 seconds later, you'd be reading, well, if you actually look at the crime scene photos, they measured the shoe print and it's 11 and a half inches. So it's not the same. Like, okay, well, we can't even get to settled facts to argue about, and there was a lot of things sort of like that. And, I know I'm a big like true crime fan, obviously, but in like forensic stuff, but I think a lot of people don't really understand that apart from DNA, a lot of the kind of old school forensic stuff they did was bullshit. Like, like hair analysis, that I don't know. I'm not a scientist, but I know that they've overturned a lot of old cases that were prosecuted with just junk science, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even if you look at, for example, matching a bullet to a gun, that doesn't apply in this case, but if you have like a Glock 40 caliber, even like one model, if you shoot that gun and then you have a bullet from a crime scene and you match them, well, how do you know that bullet wouldn't also match 15,000 other Glocks, right? That have similar boring, like it's not as airtight as a lot of people think. It's certainly not as certain as DNA is. DNA, I've seen numbers thrown about where they're like, yeah, this matches this person, and the chance of it being anybody else is 1 in 8 billion or something, where it's like, okay,
Right.
it's to the exclusion of all other people on Earth. So, but yeah, so anyway, little side note there, but so apparently
No,
the
it's cool.
police examined the ski cap found at the crime scene, and they revealed it contained, quote unquote, African American hair fibers, but they determined it didn't match OJ Simpson, which, if you're trying to build the case for it was Jason, you're like, oh, that's interesting. It doesn't match OJ. But at the same time, there are a lot of allegations of evidence tampering and corrupt
Mm-hmm.
investigation where, if the LAPD wanted to, could they have just claimed that it was consistent with OJ's hair, or because I think the biggest controversy with the DNA or physical evidence in this case comes from blood, which we'll get to later. But
Mm-hmm.
maybe they just didn't have the ability to sort of mess with the hair evidence. Maybe they were able to just turn that over, and the tech was like, no, this doesn't match, and so they couldn't do anything about it. But the blood, from what I understand, they had vials of blood in their car, for hours that they never turned into the crime scene, or they never turned into like the evidence locker. And it sounds like on several of the blood stains they found, they were able to find, oh, where is it? It's got there. They found that not only was there blood in the sample, but there was I believe it's a preservative that they put, like, so if they take your blood and put it in a vial, they put in like a preservative or a stabilizer so it doesn't just, go bad or congeal or whatever. But when they found these blood samples, a few of them had that stabilizer in it. So it had to have come out of a sample tube. So the obvious inference there is that it was planted there.
Right.
But
That was a key theme, even from back when I was a kid, like that it seemed like really the linchpin of the trial or of the investigation too was blood evidence and the handling of it, and
yeah,
the mishandling of it is like really what the defense seized on.
yeah. I mean, I can't think of any reasonable explanation why there would be blood that had been previously in a vial found at the crime scene. So even if you had this guy dead to rights, a jury can't convict a guy with that evidence out there. I mean, that's the definition of reasonable doubt. Like, if this is what the police are doing, what else are they doing?
Right.
And if they're willing to contaminate a crime scene, that in and of itself is enough to be like, I mean, like I said, it's the definition of a reasonable doubt. It's not. You don't have to prove your case to 100%. You don't prove it to 51%. It's got to be like 95%, basically, for beyond a reasonable doubt. And so, if that's what they did, they deserve to lose the case. So,
one thing I just wanted to go back to too, about the beanie and them finding the hair of a quote unquote unidentified African American that didn't match OJ is, I don't know if you saw this too, but they also found dog hairs on that same beanie too.
Yeah.
And then there's like an infamous like photo that's been passed around. I don't know if it is the same one that you were talking about.
Yeah, it is.
Where it's Jason Simpson wearing the beanie and his dog is sitting right next to him on the bed. like so that it implies, he was close with the dog, and he would have been around it. But another thing too, it's like it's the most generic looking fucking beanie in the world. It's like that could be anyone's beanie, but in the context of like evidence found was a beanie, and they couldn't it didn't link to OJ, and there was dog hair on it. It's like, to me, it's like that screams, let's look at that. Why didn't they test DNA against Jason Simpson? But
Yeah, there's a lot
right.
of things that
Yeah.
that definitely beg the question of why not go down this road a little more, And I mean, kind of jumping back into his background a little bit. Apparently, the guy's trained in hand-to-hand combat and field knife training that
Yeah.
that he learned at the Army and Navy Academy. It's like, okay, uh,
Yeah, add
you
it to
know,
the pile.
yeah, that same private investigator in the storage unit we talked about discovered at least one knife, or I think multiple, but there was one knife in particular. Oh, excuse me, one knife in particular that they say matched, or at least is consistent with the murder weapon. And I guess one of the knives, they found that the butt of the knife matched. I guess she had Nicole had a blunt force injury to the top of her head, like she got bonked.
Right.
And they say that the butt of this knife kind of matches the imprint, and it's pretty crazy. I don't know what it was like back then, but I know just recently there was a trial. There was a case of this kid in Wisconsin, I think. He killed his parents and chopped them up and dumped their bodies all over the place. And it was a brutal case. They had a forensic anthropologist come on who specializes in like knife wound analysis, and the stuff that they're able to discern or decipher from uh, like bones and tissue, it's unreal. They can
Mhm.
zoom in and see, oh, okay, well, this knife, it was a serrated knife, and there's 10 teeth per millimeter, or we know
Jesus
we know
Christ.
it's this wide, this long, this deep, and they can even see like they can see things that lend themselves to like psychological factors, like hesitation marks, or if you
Oh,
if you start sawing and it gets stuck and you have to move over to a new spot, that first area where you started sawing is like a gold mine for info, because that's where you can see a lot of the characteristics of blade. So
damn.
up until I saw that, I didn't realize like, oh yeah, this is similar to the same knife. It's like, how would you know if you just stab somebody? You
Yeah.
don't really know like how deep is it, whatever.
Or like
But
what
yeah,
their intention
apparently,
behind that was, like that
yeah,
strike.
yeah, and apparently the only knives they found at OJ's house were like a Swiss Army knife and a stiletto, and they sounds like they were pretty pretty easily able to rule those out
Right.
as having caused the injuries. And I don't know how much you've looked into or read about the injuries sustained by both of them.
Pretty fucking brutal.
Pretty brutal. So, but what's interesting, I don't know the order, right? And I don't know if anybody really knows for sure of the murderer, was the murderer attacking her and he came upon the scene, or was he attacked first? Because, if you're trying to attack a man and a woman, you would think that you would go for the guy first,
Right.
right? Because he's going to be the bigger problem in
Mm-hmm.
general, don't get upset with me.
Yeah.
Um, but he was subject to uh, more stab wounds, I feel like they're less brutal. So she was stabbed, I think, 7 times in like the face, neck, head, and then she basically had her throat cut all
Like
the way from
almost
left to right,
decapitated. Yeah.
almost decapitated. They said that, so the blade went through her jugular, um, both sides of her neck, into her spine, and it
Mm-hmm.
said that the knife went almost like 3/4 of an inch into her vertebrae. Like that is so much force. It's unreal.
Yeah.
Something that you'd expect from someone who's just blind with rage.
Right.
But Ron, it sounds like he was stabbed like 15 times all over. So that kind of suggests to me that he put up more of a fight, and this person is just like stabbing wherever they could before he finally succumbed to it. Whereas Nicole, it kind of just seems like she just was overpowered and just murdered.
Yeah, she just got
somewhat
throttled
quickly.
Yeah. And it's that part too, talking about Ron Goldman, and he had a ton of defensive wounds on him too.
Yeah.
And he was, I know this is not new news for people that have followed this, but he was like a 3rd-degree black belt. I don't know in what discipline, if it was Taekwondo or Jiu-Jitsu or whatever, but I mean, it seems like you'd be able to handle yourself. And if you've ever seen photos of the dude, he looked like no slouch. Like he looked like he could handle himself, and put up a fight. And I mean, the evidence seems to suggest that he did. And then one of the points too, that we probably overlap on is they claim, OJ, the only mark he had, a nick or a scuff on his knuckle on one of his hands, which we don't know what Jason looked like, but based on what Ron Goldman looked like and all his defensive wounds, it looked like he put up a strong fight. So I would have liked to see, like if they pulled Jason Simpson in and had him strip down and, take photos and examine his body, like what he looked like, because it seemed like it doesn't match like what happened to Ron Goldman versus OJ having a little tiny scuff. I mean, even when if he attacked Nicole Brown, I can picture a woman like fighting for her life. You're still going to get in more than a scratch on someone's knuckle, but either way, like I think the biggest part for me in Ron Goldman's case, like him getting taken out, doesn't point to OJ. To me, it more points to, Jason, obviously, but with all the defensive wounds and everything. And that's an interesting point too, that you brought up about how it seemed like he wanted to get Ron Goldman dealt with quickly and maybe out of the way. Maybe that's why they were quicker. They weren't as deep. It's like, let's get rid of this threat. Here's the object of my rage. And it amped it up, turned it up to 11 when whoever the attacker went to her. Sure.
Yeah. Or, if it's not OJ or his son, some mysterious third person. And like you said, he was no slouch. He was definitely a big dude. And it's funny because OJ had the cut on his hand, somewhere on his hand, but there wasn't. So when you see stabbings like that, it's really common to see people like their hand slide off the handle because it's covered in like blood, which is super slippery and viscous.
Right.
So he only had the one cut on his hand, but there was no cut in the glove corresponding to where the cut on his hand was. So that would have been a pretty damning piece of evidence. Like, well, yeah, he only had this one little cut, like on the webbing of his thumb or whatever. But what do you know? The glove has a cut in that exact same spot, which is not the case.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, like you said, I think it was the day after the murders, LAPD brought in OJ, and he stripped down, and they didn't see any marks or bruises.
Yeah, and he was an old dude too at that time, like not super old, but he was older. And I mean, the case too for like him being able to put up a fight and go toe to toe with Ron Goldman, who's like, he was in his late 20s, mid to late 20s, maybe early 30s at the most.
He's looking like a young Ryan Gosling too. He's a handsome boy.
Yeah, he was a handsome devil for sure.
Well, and they also found, even take the Ron Goldman thing out of it too. They found blood and skin under Nicole's fingernails. And even if that was the only resistance he met during the attack, he's going to have scratches,
Yeah, where's that?
And what do you know? They tested the DNA under fingernails and it didn't come back for OJ. They obviously didn't test it to see if it was his son. And I'm not really sure how that works, but if you get half your DNA from your dad and half from your mom, if you were testing it looking for your dad's DNA, for example, I wonder if they would notice, like, it doesn't match his dad, but half of it's really close,
if that would be like a sign of like yeah, I don't either. I've seen some people come back and say, whoa, with the DNA, they would have been able to be like, oh, it's Jason. But I don't know if he was in the system or if you have to like specifically get a sample, like a fresh sample from that person, or if there would be any, like you say, like if there'd be any kind of like familial like DNA markers.
I think nowadays probably, but back then it was, I mean, we're talking 20, what is that, 28 years ago or
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah.
It was not as advanced as it is now. I mean, the stuff they can do nowadays is just unreal. So
Yeah. And that's the thing too, around that time, I feel like I might be talking a little bit out of school, but if it wasn't like the premiere, it was very close behind. This was like one of the most, like to me, I think it was one of the first, like at least highly publicized cases where DNA was like at the forefront. Like that was like the main tool on the prosecution side, and like in court proceedings and trials in general, like it was really, this is when it was like just coming out. So like with anything else, there's going to be bugs. There's going to be, it wasn't like dialed in. They can't do all the crazy shit they can do nowadays. Like, cause I know when I was younger, I used to think about it like, oh yeah, DNA evidence, but it's not, it wasn't refined to the level it is now, or even 10 years ago. So.
Right. And well, and also the public understanding of DNA as well. Like if you polled any random person on the street, they'd probably be able to give you a pretty good explanation of what it is and like how it works. I was reading, there was a quote from one of the jurors. They were asking about the DNA evidence, and I can't remember the exact quote, but it definitely showed a lack of understanding. And she basically was equating it to, like, well, yeah, lots of people have similar blood types, not realizing that, well, DNA is totally different than just having the same or similar blood types. So
hey, I'm O positive too.
Yeah, and you've got to kind of, I mean, like it or not, a jury is made of people, and some people are just fucking stupid or uninformed. So it's a scary place to be, even if you absolutely did nothing wrong and you're staring at a jury. You never know what they're getting. The chance of a wrongful conviction is never zero. That's for sure.
Right. Yeah.
So there was a bunch of fingerprints they found at the scene.
Oh yeah. Wasn't it like 15? And they couldn't tell if it was like, from what I heard, they couldn't tell if it was 15 individual fingerprints from 15 different people or 15 fingerprints from 3 different people or one.
Yeah, what I saw simply said none of the 15 separate fingerprints. That makes me think that they found 15 individual samples good enough for identification. I don't know, because if they found, let's say they found 10 unique and then 5 that were the same thumbprint or whatever, I feel like they would probably call that 11. Maybe not. I could just be reading into that more so, but the basic fact is that it sounds like they didn't match OJ's, and Jason's fingerprints were never compared. So just another example of could be, maybe, we don't know.
You know what the weird thing is though too, now that I think about it, he was in the system because he had, like you were saying, he had like an assault charge or like going after his ex-girlfriend with a knife and either a current girlfriend and a boss. I wonder if he was taken in and he had fingerprints. So
you would think
they should have been able to just, like, if he was a suspect, to rule him out. To me, it seems pretty that would be one of the ways that you would easily rule someone out.
Right. Yeah, totally. And then another strange thing after the murder is the very next day, before OJ was even arrested or even he himself represented by an attorney, he hired one for his son, which is very weird. I can't think of any reason why. I mean, if you're the ex-husband, you're going to be the first person that gets looked at. Why, under any circumstances, would you hire an attorney for your son?
Yeah.
First, that doesn't make sense.
It seems like a panic move to me.
Yeah. So, I mean, that leads you to believe that either the son did something or the son knew something,
Mm-hmm.
and he was just trying. I mean, because a lawyer's main job is basically to just tell you to shut the fuck up when it comes to cops, right? Like,
Right.
do not speak to cops. Um, in 99% of the cases, talking to the police, there's no upside in it for you. I mean, they're professional interrogators. Most of them are very good at their job, and you could be innocently trying to explain something, and if you slip up, you know, that's gonna really hurt you. And
Yeah. Just pull that Uno reverse card on you later.
yeah, if they have a case against you, they're gonna prosecute it. So there's no need to give them any extra ammo. And well, and then like people I think don't realize after something crazy happens, or and when people are experiencing trauma or under severe stress, their memory is really shitty. So, like,
Oh
let's
yeah.
say you were in a car, let's say you were in a car accident, and the cop wants to come and ask you like what happened. There's a good chance that your memory is not going to be accurate because your brain is like dealing with this stress. So now, let's say you're accused of murdering your wife or whatever, and then they come and talk to you, and you give them fake information. Now you're just giving them rope to hang you with later. So
Right.
it is unusual that he got his son an attorney before he got himself one. But who knows? Maybe, I mean, he was out of town, like on a business trip. Maybe it's possible he knew, well, they're not going to be able to get to me till I get back into town. So I should at least just get my way lawyered up now. And then when I get back, before they try to bring me in for an interview, then I can get somebody. So who knows? There might be a logical, sort of logistical reason for it, but it's just another one of those things that looks strange. Stabbing somebody to death, that's got to be so, like, I can't even wrap my mind around how brutal that must be, because I mean, despite what people see on TV and stuff, you don't die right away. It takes a while, and yeah, I just can't even imagine the brutality of that. I found the note here I made about that artificial preservative. So they found a pair of bloody socks in OJ's bedroom that had uh, blood on it, and then blood stains on the gate at Nicole's house. Um, so the blood stains on the gate at Nicole's house was OJ's blood, and the pair of bloody socks I believe had either Nicole or Ron's blood, but
Hmm.
both of those samples they found contained a preservative that's called EDTA. That
Ah.
that means it came from a previously collected sample. So that's absolutely damning to the
Yeah.
investigation. And I think the speculation is that they collected some blood from the scene, uh, and then they had vials of it in their car for an extended period of time. And I think they had OJ's blood in a lab already for some reason. And they think they just went over and maybe sprinkled a little bit to just sort of sweeten their case.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I know the
See,
LAPD.
my theory to like bring this all home is like my main theory is that they were working for, or they were helping OJ out by like self-sabotage because
Oh, that's interesting thought.
because he was really buddy with a lot of the LAPD, and they liked him a lot. They liked the spectacle of like, that was when he was at the top of the world. I think like right before that, he was in like, he had been in all of the Naked Gun movies with Leslie Nielsen. He was in the third one. He was fresh coming off of that. And he was like a fixture in LA, like where he lived, I think Brentwood, which is like a hoity-toity suburb. But he was friends with a lot of LAPD officers, like the department. He would like do like functions and golf tourneys and all kinds of stuff with them. And then that ties back into like, the some of the horrific 911 calls. And when they were at the peak of Nicole Brown and he fighting and the domestic violence and stuff like that, like they would just shine it on. They wouldn't treat it like with the severity that you should treat something like that, especially some of those phone calls just sound fucking insane, you know.
Mhm.
And I think this is all of me just pulling out of my ass, but I'm pretty sure it was at least 2 or 3, maybe more calls for like domestic disturbance. And every time like he got off, nothing came of it. And like he would go down to the station, you know, for processing or whatever, to get statements and stuff. And like, you know, there was like anecdotes that he was palling around, he was laughing, like he was with his boys, you know, like he was tight with that group. So I guess to bring this all home, like in like an overarching like theory, my take on it is that I think Jason did it, and for all of the litany of stuff that we talked about previous, but that his dad, he either stumbled upon it or knew about it like immediately afterwards and was like, okay, whether he verbalized it or not, he was like, I'm going to get my son out of this. And he pulled in every favor that he could. And then he did the spectacle. Like he did a lot of shit that is super counterintuitive. I know like someone that high profile, it's kind of unprecedented to be in that situation, that place and time in the mid 90s. But, you know, he made a big spectacle with the Bronco chase and, you know, with Al Cowlings, and he did a lot of weird things right at the beginning, how he did that whole standoff, not wanting to come in. And I just think that he did everything in his power. Like, and he did that weird thing too. Like he flew to fucking Chicago to try to create an alibi for himself. I think all the seemingly dumb things that he did immediately following the murders, I think they're still dumb, but that was also his way of maybe trying to throw the scent off and direct it towards him. And then he just got lucky enough to also get off. And that's kind of it in a nutshell, without like beating the shit out of a dead horse, is my take on it. And I mean, it's all highly circumstantial, but at very minimum, I think all the things that we talked about that stack up like against Jason Simpson, and it makes him a really good suspect, is why wasn't he pursued or just looked at a little bit closer? I mean, the guy that you mentioned, William Deere, who wrote that book, was he is he just a private investigator guy, or was he a lawyer?
As far as I know, he was just a private investigator, but he might be like a former, you know, homicide detective or something.
Well, I mean, that book, which I also didn't read, but I mean, he brought light to all this stuff. So why couldn't the LAPD have done that back at the time, or done more to rule out or look at some? But see, that's the other thing too. Like, you know, what if OJ was like, okay, self-sabotage, and he pulled out all these favors that he could with people that he knew on the inside to throw him off the trail of his son. That's it in a nutshell, is what I think. But
well, and yeah, I mean, I think you definitely lean a little bit more conspiratorial than I do on that. But shocker, I know.
Yeah.
but what's interesting is like, it's still an open case, right? It's a murder case. The statute of limitations doesn't ever go away. So even though they think they know who did it, it's still an open case. There's no reason why they should have gotten rid of those DNA samples. So if somebody really wanted to, it wouldn't be that difficult for the DA to go in and test those DNA samples to Jason.
Maybe do you think that's realistic though? Because that would just open up so many old wounds, and it wouldn't make them look good by because that'd be admitting fault, admitting that they didn't pursue a suspect with the kind of credence that they should have at the beginning. But
I could see the argument for that. I could also see it as, you know, if they could find a way to clear that case, that might be good publicity for them, and they could sort of spin it to be a positive for them. You know, like, oh well, we think that even though OJ didn't do it. We think that he sabotaged the investigation from the beginning and made it basically impossible for us to get to the truth by, obscuring all this stuff. And there's definitely a decent amount of evidence that points to OJ for being guilty that I can't really explain.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah, that's one thing we definitely glossed over. I mean, or otherwise this would be like a fucking 5-part, 2-hour long
Right.
each thing. Like, so to narrow it to Jason Simpson, I know we're glossing over some stuff, and I'm sure anyone could pick apart this saying, well, what about this? And like looking at all the stuff that's stacked up pretty hard against OJ, which I'm not discounting either. It just, to me, like the rage, it being classified as a rage killing. This guy has rage disorder. He quit taking his meds. He has fucking knife training, just da 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 da. It's just like, this is a good suspect. Why weren't the depths plumbed a little bit more here?
yeah,
And I mean, to say it's fun to think about, it's like the brutal nature of these crimes. It's intriguing. Like, because I was so immersed in the case, and it's just, it's OJ versus the state, it, to me, like hearing it 20 years later, finding out about like all these things about Jason Simpson, it was just like super intriguing to like learn about. So
yeah, I agree. And being older now and being able to pay more attention, and I just kind of wish I would have been older at that time, because you see cases now that the way they're covered in the media are not at all what's actually going on.
mm-hmm.
So there's always that other factor of the narrative, So
Right.
So much of my reading about this is like a retroactive narrative where, without watching the entire trial, it's like, okay, what is actually happening, not what are people telling you happened, right?
Yeah, it was so weird being immersed in it at a young age, and like it kind of made like celebrities out of
Oh yeah,
everyone involved with it. Like, I remember, I mean, having an inside track of having a stepfather figure, teaching me the ins and outs of this, and they're going into Cross now, and like, oh, F. Lee Bailey, this guy's a genius, and like, and then like Judge Lance Ito had the dancing Itos, and he was on like fucking Jay Leno, and Marcia Clark and Christopher Darden, and Johnny Cochran. I see, like, at that time I was like, yeah, dude, like I was like, Johnny Cochran's a fucking badass. Like it made celebrities out of everyone in that case. So I think that case specifically, just all the players in it and its place in time, it was a super unique thing.
Yeah, it definitely captured the nation, that's for sure. Because I think when you think about court cases, they seem really boring and dry and like stodgy, if that's the right word. But then, it's like watching a TV show. When you get involved with the characters, you get emotionally invested, and
Mm-hmm.
people were definitely emotionally invested.
Oh yeah,
in this case.
I remember because this was pre 9/11, like up to 9/11. It's like, do you remember where you were when you heard the OJ verdict? Seeing video footage of people seeing it reported, and people just like bursting down and like, oh god, this is a travesty, and then like others, like celebrating, like, and that was me, because like I was totally on that defense side. Like I was pumped. I was like, yeah, like OJ, fuck yeah, like.
Yeah, I remember
Anyway.
I was in school, and I was actually in a Lutheran school at the time, which is a different story for a different day. But I remember seeing some of the other students. I think I was like in second grade, maybe. Seeing some of the other kids. Some were happy and some were bummed.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember thinking at the time, you don't know anything, You're
8.
There's no reason for you to be reacting one way or the other. I mean, you're clearly just sort of parroting whatever your parents think, but
Right.
I don't know. I just remember thinking like, this is weird. You guys are very young kids, you should not be reacting this way. But yeah.
Yeah, I remember talking about like on the schoolyard and shit, and like, did you see when Furman went in on Cross? And people are looking at me like I'm just a fucking freak show. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, it wasn't until like it took me a long fucking time to come around to the fact and be like, oh fuck, yeah, I was on the wrong side of that, you know.
Maybe not.
Well, I mean, before all this Jason Simpson stuff too, and like even considering that, I mean, the strong likelihood is for sure OJ did it. And then maybe now like the conspiratorial brain of me is like, I think fucking Jason Simpson had something to do with it at least.
Yeah.
If not just wholly, you know, doing it. But
yeah, maybe he was called there instead of calling his dad there.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a couple weird things with the timeline that I can't get over. Like they
is one that where he flew to Chicago like right after and then flew right back.
No,
that one always weirded me out.
I think that was always the plan. Like he was going there for something. And
he just tried to like horse collar it into being an alibi.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, because his original alibi was like, so going back to the timeline, one of the reports I saw said that they believe the murder happened between like 9:45 and 10:05, and Jason had no alibi after 9:50. But then when I was looking at the actual timeline, it's not until 10:15 that a neighbor of hers hears, you know, the cries and barking of a dog. So there's a little bit of a discrepancy there. But I found this other little interesting hiccup in the timeline that if the truth ever came out about would have a pretty big impact on the case. So back in 2000, the year 2000, so after
in the year 2000.
Yeah. So he obviously was acquitted in criminal court, but he still had to go to a civil trial where, so like we were talking about earlier in criminal, it's beyond a reasonable doubt, like 95, 96, whatever percent. In the civil trial, it's like 51% is basically the burden, right? Like, is it more likely than not that you were guilty of this? And so he was found guilty. He was found guilty in civil court in order to pay $30+ million to the Browns and the Goldmans, which I don't think he's paid back anything.
No.
But there was some disagreement. So when he was attempting to get his civil judgment thrown out, and one of the things he was trying to do is get Nicole's mom's phone records, because there was some disagreement about what time. So Nicole talked to her mom that night, and there's some disagreement about what time that call happened. So looking at my timeline, they left the restaurant at 8 o'clock, and her parents were there, and her parents had to drive home, and they lived in Dana Point, which it looks like it's an hour and 15, hour and 30 minutes, depending on traffic away. So in court, it was reported that she talked to her mom at 9:45 or whatever, and that would sort of match with drive time. But apparently the mom, like her first statement said that she talked to her at 11, which if that's the case, OJ was on a plane by then. And I saw there was this weird footage of during the trial, there was like an agreement between the prosecution and the defense that they weren't going to bring in phone records for some reason. It doesn't make any sense to me. And they still haven't released those phone records. I mean, because if the call's at 11, there's no doubt, you know, if she was still alive at 11, it would contradict with what the neighbor heard. It would also contradict with, so Goldman left the restaurant to bring her glasses, we probably should have covered that. That's why he was there. He left the restaurant at like 9:50. So that
Give her glasses. Where I come from, that's called doing the hibbity dibbity.
And a banana cognac, bitch.
yeah. So who knows? Maybe that was the screaming the neighbor heard. But yeah. So I mean, if the phone call was at 11, it would be impossible to be in two places at once. They didn't find the body till after midnight. So. Yeah. Or if the phone call was at 9:45, why was the mom so sure it was 11 at first? I've seen people say that there's no way they could get from the restaurant back home by 9:45. But when I looked at the map, it seemed very doable.
Doable, yeah.
Yeah, very doable. So,
that is a strange feature of the civil case. Like, why wouldn't you want the fucking phone records?
Yeah, I mean, it would seem to benefit everyone, right?
Yeah.
I mean, because he's already, the civil suit or the criminal case is already over. They can't try him ever again. So
right.
If they get the, I guess the family's like, fuck you. This could only go bad for us.
Maybe they just wanted to fucking stitch it up.
Yeah, they're not going to get that money anyway. But you'd think that they would want to know the truth also.
And then he had the really smart idea of co-authoring a book called Why, or what was it? If I Did It.
So originally, God, I'm going to see if I can get this right. It was originally I Did It, I think. Or no. Yeah, so it was originally called If I Did It. And he wrote it. God, I'm trying to remember. Yeah, so anyway, so he writes this book about if he did do it, this is how he would have done it. The estate of Goldman and Brown immediately were like, thanks, you're not going to make any money off this because you owe us $30 million. So we'll just go ahead and take that from you. Thank you very much. So any money they made from that book goes to the family. But then they changed it. They changed the way the book looks, so it looks like it just says I did it, confessions of a whatever.
Right.
I have it here somewhere, but yeah, it's wild. And I actually highlighted an excerpt from it. Let's see. So this is, oh God, this is an actual quote from the book. It says, if I had actually done it, I would have brought my good gloves that day.
Oh my God.
I would have thought it was a shame when they shrunk when I left them out on the patio, but I would have brought them just the same. They were my lucky gloves, and I would have needed them because I was going to stab my slut of a wife, hypothetically.
Dude, what a twisted mind.
Yeah.
I wonder if that was, I wonder how much of that was embellished later by the Browns having, because it seems like they would have carte blanche to spice some things up if they wanted to, you know?
I don't know if
that's the way it worked.
No, I think by the time it got to them, it had already been like authored and published. They were just
gotcha.
like,
so they through legal channels, they were able to like redirect the funds to them, like a wage garnishment kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay,
They're
I
just
gotcha.
like, oh,
yeah, that's a really dumb move. Then why would you write that? Like Jesus,
I think he was that hard up for cash at the time. I mean, the same reason why, I guess it's been 10 or 15 or 20 years, who knows now at this point, when him and his goon friends rolled up into that Vegas hotel, and he spent 9 years in prison for that.
That's nuts. Was that when he fucking like assaulted some people and tried to reclaim his Heisman Trophy or something? Or
I just remember that they busted into this dude's hotel room in Vegas who had some of his sports memorabilia that he claims they stole, but I don't think they actually stole it. I think they probably just bought it at like a auction or something. But yeah, they got him on all kinds of kidnapping, crazy charges, and yeah, he served 9 years.
Boy, I wish I had something to knock your ass out with. I'll knock your ass out. I'll knock the shit out your ugly ass.
Okay.
All right. Well, I think it's probably time to land this bitch. This porpoise has been waxed, I feel like.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's not a good resolution to this, but it's definitely interesting to think about. So,
What's your take? I know I did my whole tinfoil hat tangent.
yeah,
What's
you think
your
it was,
what's the long and short for you?
you think it was aliens? I think OJ probably did it, but I don't think they proved their case beyond a reasonable doubt. So I think the jury came to the only logical conclusion they could come to. But I mean, when you look at some of the evidence, there was the tainted blood. That's the only real way to put it. Like those couple samples, but I mean, there's blood in his car. There's blood, you know, uh, other places, and some of it was like his mixed with theirs. The car chase is weird. That in and of itself isn't for me damning because people do weird stuff, but that's just an odd thing to do. I mean, if you're that high profile and high powered and mentally stable, you just get an attorney and be like, fuck, deal with this guy. I mean, it doesn't make sense that you're not going to get away, especially when you're driving super slowly. But maybe the same type of person who doesn't think through things rationally decides to just murder his ex-wife, and that poor dude who just I think he just happened to be there. I don't think they had any sort of romantic relationship. And
Yeah, I don't know what I'm pulling that from, is if it's just from being immersed in the trial in the mid 90s, but like it's just always been in my head like that was,
yeah, I've heard that too.
Was settled science, like that. Oh yeah, they were fucking for sure, like. But it sounds like from the stuff you saw, or at least your perspective is that it wasn't that clear cut.
Yeah, that's kind of the feeling I'm getting, but
right
yeah,
on.
and like his alibi changed. He said one thing, and then it's I don't know. It's not just one thing. It's like we talked about. It's kind of the totality. And I mean, he certainly had a motive. And I've seen a lot of people that were like, "Well, he's never stabbed her. He just beat the shit out of her." It's like,
yeah,
well, yeah. I mean, that's kind of how escalation works, though.
Right. And I mean, he got, like I said, what is factual is there were like multiple calls, multiple instances, and he got out of it every time.
Yeah.
Which just empowers him more to just be like, oh yeah, I can do what I want. I'm OJ, like, because he wasn't one of the first, but just maybe his time and place, like he was in the fucking the Naked Gun movies and stuff, and like he was within that like celebrity kind of sphere in LA during that time, so
yeah, he went to college down there too, so he had been like an LA staple for years.
Like he was like hometown hero, like,
yeah.
So yeah, he went to USC. Okay. All right, well, that's gonna wrap it up for Jason Simpson. I mean, if anything else, I thought it was fun just to kind of learn about it a little bit more and bounce it off one another.
Yeah,
so
feel free to email or whatever if you have any thoughts. Maybe if something comes up, we could do like a little follow-up deal.
Definitely.
Everything we got wrong.
Yeah. Which I'm sure there was a lot of, but I misspoke the last episode. Our Twitter handle is actually Waxing the Porp, PORP. Too many characters. Waxing the Porpoise at Instagram. And yeah, our email is wax@waxingtheporpoise.com. Let us know if we left anything out, or if you have any other intriguing tidbits that might add.
When you throw this up, you could always put links to those down in the show notes.
Those will be there for sure. And I'll throw a couple of the links where I got my information. The main one was a subreddit of Change My Mind that I got like that person had done a lot of research, but then I wish I would have had time to read that book by William Deere, because he sounded like he really got to the bottom of a lot of shit, including like that whole locker thing seems like kind of a bombshell. But if the cops would have had access to that at that time, because I think too it was more so like about one of those knives too. It was like one of them like matched one of the attack patterns of the wounds. So I mean that seems pretty huge to me too. Like maybe that could be evidence pointing to Jason, or maybe it was one thing we didn't consider is maybe Jason was trying to help his dad out.
Right.
Who knows?
Yeah, who knows?
That's one side of it too.
Who called whom?
Yeah.
I just sent you over a bunch of links too, if you want to include any of those. Some of them are just absolute garbage, but they might have like one or two little interesting things in there. I just sent over everything that I had found. So
cool. All righty. Well, that's going to wrap it up for that episode. So again, keeping with the theme of the show, we're going to randomize what our next topic will be, and then or what category, movie unexplained or potpourri, and then we'll see what we're going to talk about.
spin that wheel.
All right. So we're bouncing back to movies this time, and
do we want to decide right now, or do we want to tease it?
Like, should I give a hint about what it is?
Sure.
Okay.
Better not be stupid.
No, it's dope. That's one of my favorites of all time.
The Ghost in the Darkness.
That is a banger, but that's not in the 80s. So this is a film from the 80s, early 80s, that kind of bombed when it came out, and then since it has become a revered like cult classic, sci-fi cult classic by a very famous director who is British.
And
that might be too much.
That sounds awful. And you're sure it's one I haven't seen?
Pretty sure, yeah.
Okay.
It was off the list that you vetted, that you for sure had not seen, that we're starting with. So that's the tease. We'll be back again next week talking about that film. Thanks for joining us, guys, and take it easy.
Thanks, guys.
Fucking filthy, dirty, fucking motherfucker.